Well, no, the clown nose helps a lot to get across. You can't hear anything in the back there. And,
yeah, the clown. All right, well, I'm gonna get my booze on first.
Right. You open all of your beers.
Should I just line them up?
Does it help the speech?
Probably not.
How's
business going? Before I was doing it behind the scenes.
And the link works, huh?
The link works now. It works.
Yeah, it was. It was nice. It only didn't work on Macs, right? That's what it was.
On iPhones.
On iPhone? No, it didn't work on my Mac either. So it was a Safari problem. But you fixed it the next day or the day later or something.
We're good. You do need to use the mic so we can get it on the video.
Right. You guys ready? Oh, you got a resolution problem? Can you draw?
Yeah, I can do that.
He needs a 1024 by 1060.
I can do that. Alright, 640 by 480 by 16.
How's that?
Awesome.
Good? Alright, there you go. Alright. Here you guys go. Billy on some web performance stuff with his new company.
Thank you, Scott. All right, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. All right, I just want to reiterate, Skydog was up here talking about it, but, these guys really do, it's very special when you have a conference that is not run with profit in mind. And that's a good thing, and we need more of those. And we need more places where people can come and talk about really cool stuff they're working on. Like Project Floodgate, that's probably one of the coolest things I've seen in probably the last 6-7 months. I mean, that's awesome. And I wouldn't have seen it, I wouldn't have known about it whether I came here. So, Outerz0ne is a fantastic conference, and we need more things like this, and they need your support. So if you haven't already donated, please do. If you want to they closed down the t-shirt stand, right? Is it going to be up tomorrow? No? Well, you all are out of luck. No t-shirts for any of you if you don't already have them. But I bet if you begged Skydog, he'd probably reopen it. So, anyway, do try to support them because this is exactly the type of organization that needs our help. All right, so my standard thing is that I'm from the South and I drink a lot of Red Bull and I talk really damn fast. So, hopefully this very tasty Mike's Hard Lemonade will help counteract those effects, but I also kind of have to pee, so I don't know what's going to happen. I'm probably going to talk really fast. But if you can't understand me or you got a question, just stop me, because I'll just keep on going and going and going. So please say something to me. Basically, this presentation is about how to make websites and web applications faster, which are always good. So just a quick background about me. You guys know who I am. I agree with what Skydog was talking about earlier. It's not necessarily good to put on labels. And also, who was the gal talking about the media or media hacking, basically for the hackerspace? Yeah. So I thought that was a really good point. That she's like, well, I don't do info security. There are a lot of people who are hackers. Hacking has nothing to do with information security. I gave a talk at Freaknik right after I got sued, actually, and it was about it was called The Process of a Hack. And it basically says all hacking is critical thinking. You take a system, you analyze it, you break it down to its fundamental parts, and you start learning how the system works. And invariably, you end up figuring out, wait a minute, there are flaws in this system. It's very conducive to doing security work, but really it's higher thinking, it's analysis. And so I don't really think of myself as a security guy, even though I've been doing security for, probably 6, 7, 8, 9 years now. I really just think of myself as curious, and that's all you need to be a good hacker, is just be curious. As long as I have things that are shiny and things I can take apart and Red Bull, I'm a happy camper. So, you don't need to, don't worry if you don't do security. That's not what this is about. I've had kind of a wide, interesting range of experiences. I've walked into a law office before with that man back there with the crazy pants named Strick, who was able to give me great legal advice and counsel. I used to do a lot of stuff with low-level hardware. When I got out of Georgia Tech, I did a lot of web hacking and web analysis. And pretty much in October, I left HP and I founded a new company called Outerz0ne. And we specialize on web performance. Basically, we find problems with your website that are slowing it down, is the easiest way to say it. And a lot of people thought you're crazy. Why are you leaving security where you're fairly well known, you've written books about it, and going to web performance? Web performance sounds boring. Well, hopefully as we do this talk, you realize, actually, there's a lot of cool stuff about web performance. It's not the boring stuff you think. Excuse me. Also, a lot of the stuff I knew about dealing with websites and finding SQL injection and cross-site scripting and problems with websites, 95% of what I was doing was how do you crawl and analyze websites? How do you analyze JavaScript? How do you break apart Flash and reverse engineer it? How do you break apart Silverlight? So all of that work, whether the end thing you're doing is finding security problems or performance problems, it really doesn't matter. 95% of it is the same. So this is what I've started, and it's been about 6 weeks or about 6 months, and so far it's been pretty successful. So why? Why even care about performance? Well, poor performance costs you money. There's obviously operational costs, right? Like if your website is pushing, if you have your JPEGs and your logo, when it's rendered on the HTML, is only, say, 300 pixels by 200 pixels, but it's a JPEG that is 2,000 pixels by 1,000 pixels, you're pushing a lot of data down the pipe that's not actually being used. So at the very least, you're wasting bandwidth. You start dealing with server load. You start getting into power and cooling costs. When you deal with a virtualized environment, I mean, good Lord, we've got a netbook back there running 6 VMs for the hack lab, right? You've got like 128 megs or 256 megs of memory allocated to these things. When you deal with a virtual environment, if you can look at a website and say, wow, you can make some changes and then your server load is going to drop to 70% of what it is now, or you don't need as much storage, or you don't need as much RAM, you can take that and allocate it to something else. So another really great benefit. When I started this, I kind of thought the operational costs, that's what everyone would be excited about, right? It's really obvious. You pushed X number of bytes down the pipe last month and it cost you Y. This month you're only going to push down, say, A, so you are going to spend less money. I thought that would be really obvious, but it actually turns out that the bad user experience has enormous costs. So Google did some research, and they found that for every half second of delay they added to a search results page, they lost 20% of revenue, ad revenue from that page. 20%. Google's net revenue, well, I'm going to remember it wrong. You're talking billions of dollars, right, for half a second. Amazon found for every 1/10 of a second delay in a product page, so say you're pulling up the Scarface DVD, for every 1/10 of a second delay that was added, 1% of sales dropped. So people would abandon it. They'd say, screw this, I'm not going to wait around to have the Scarface DVD load. Now, the interesting, and so Yahoo found for every, basically, 400 milliseconds of delay they added, they had 9% of, a 9% drop in full page traffic, meaning 9%, there was an increase of 9% of people who just didn't even bother waiting for the page to load. They just left because it was so slow and unresponsive. Now, the funny thing here to note is that those are big brand names, right? Arguably, I'd be more tolerant of Amazon being slow because I already like Amazon. They've got a lot of products. I'm very happy with their Amazon Prime shipping. I have brand loyalty. But if you're mom and pop or you're just some random company X that somebody doesn't already have loyalty to, they're going to be a lot less tolerant of your site being slow than they are of these guys being slow. And it's already costing these guys a lot of money. Well, why? Why is that such an issue? Well, users have ridiculously high expectations. 47% of visitors say they expect the page to load in less than 2 seconds. 52% of online users state that fast loading pages are very important for them being loyal to a site or not. So if you're not fast, half the people aren't going to want to be involved with you. There's some great stuff from this Akamai Forrester study that basically said, look, slow pages, 40% of users will abandon a page if it takes longer than 3 seconds to load. So and this is actually, for these bottom 3 stats, this was referring to e-commerce sites. So this is like, I've already got an item in a shopping cart, right? Like I already want to buy this Linksys router that you flash the firmware with some cool hacking stuff. I'm all ready to buy it. This is too slow. I'll just leave. So same 35% of people would abandon even before they started checking out. 65% of people will abandon checking out if it's slow. So if you have a slow site and you have any type of online revenue, be it generated from ads or be it generated from stuff you sell, performance really, really matters. There's a huge correlation between fast sites and increased revenue. So again, just to kind of summarize, faster sites mean more visitors, more repeat visitors. You end up with a more engaged user. They tend to view more pages per visit. So they don't just read this story. They don't just go to Iron Geek and read some of the awesome stuff that's getting posted or look at some really cool videos. They tend to then go and view more of the site because it's fast and they like it. You get better conversion rates. So even if you're just trying to get people to sign up for the mailing list for a hackerspace, or you're trying to get people to join a mailing list, or subscribe to your RSS feed, or follow you on Twitter, you tend to have a higher rate of people actually do those actions. More revenue, increased user satisfaction, and then of course there's the hardware and bandwidth savings we mentioned earlier. What's very interesting is the end of last year, Google kind of made this. They didn't really publicize it, but everybody took it and ran with it. And there's a guy named Matt Cutts who kind of talks a lot for Google, even though he does their anti-spam stuff. I don't know. He's kind of an odd guy. But he kind of made this mention in passing that Google is considering using how fast a page load as input into PageRank. So if you have two sites that basically contain equally good information, the faster site would appear higher in search engine rankings. And that freaked everybody out. So now they're really looking at how important performance is. So basically this site, I'm going to walk you through how to make sites faster. But to understand that, you really need to understand, okay, what's involved with the website, what's going on, what's the back end. I won't belabor this too much, but let's just take on this online store. It's called the Outerz0ne, and they have really bad movies. 1 Million BC is a horrible movie. Does anybody here watch The Soup? Did anybody watch it last night? There was an original sci-fi movie that's called Dino Croc, and they just showed a clip of it of this. Basically, if you can imagine, no, it was Dino Shark. Dino Shark, and they basically had a shark with the head of a Tyrannosaurus Rex that was leaping out of the water and eating surfers. That is the level of quality of this movie. Just letting you know. So this is your quintessential store. It's got a mix of static and dynamic content. So web pages and web apps, websites are made up. I kind of use those terms interchangeably. So a website and a web application, basically it's a content or service that's being delivered through your web browser. So dynamic content is stuff that changes based on inputs. So you say, I want to look at the Scarface DVD. Well, Amazon doesn't have 2 billion pre-made pages of all their products. Basically, they have, if you actually could see the URL, you'd see that all of the products for this page are served from product.php. And it has ID equals 138. That's a product ID. So you go and you look at, say, Dino Shark, which I'm sure will be on this site. That'll be product ID, 150. Now, the security hacker in Billy goes, that's a product ID. When they're constructing this page, they're probably consulting a database to basically say, hey, pull up the picture of this Tyrannosaurus Rex, pull up the number of items we have in stock, pull up the price, pull up comments, pull up reviews. It's pulling all that stuff dynamically out of a database. I totally would put a tick or 1 equals 1 in there and see whether there's SQL injection. Because I guarantee you that number is somehow getting to the database tier. So dynamic content changes based on input. Show me product ID 5. Show me product ID 6. Also, static content is pretty much everything else that's not the HTML. So if you think about a WordPress blog, comments can be changed. You can edit it. You can show multiple posts on the same page. So that's another good example of dynamic content. Typically, the HTML is the dynamic part of the web page, but your JavaScript, your CSS, your Flash, your applets, the fonts it has to download, PDFs, all of that stuff is static. It's already been generated, and it's just sitting on the web server. So a modern web app looks like this. You have your networking devices. This would be things like your routers, your switches, everything to get information to the web server. You have the web server itself, which is just a computer running Apache or IIS. This basically accepts requests from the user and decides what to do with it. If it's having to, say, execute code, like you've written it in Ruby or PHP or ASP.NET, something like that, it has to execute the code. It basically says, oh, you're running the program ASP or products.php. We need to execute that code. So it interprets the PHP, it tokenizes, creates bytecode, executes it, basically runs the logic that generates the page. That's what we call the application tier. And finally, we have the database tier. This is where you're actually pulling the information from. The application tier puts it all together, sends it to the web server, which delivers it through networking devices to the client's browser. Really simple. So when you're serving static content, when I say, give me CNN, hey, CNN.com, give me your logo. I want to request your logo. What happens is a logo, an image, it's static. It's just a file sitting on the web server. So your request comes through, hits the web server, and the web server goes, oh, well, that's just a file. It's just a file sitting in this directory called, resources/logos/current-logo.jpg. And so it just serves it to you. It's a static file. It doesn't have to do anything to generate the content to get back to you. But when you say, for example, you visit the Amazon page and you're getting the HTML for, say, the Scarface DVD, it's got to run some PHP or some ASP.NET, which contacts the database. And like we said, pull down the comments, the reviews of Scarface, pull down what's the quantity, what's the cost, what's the current, best-selling item, what's its item rank. It's got to talk to the database, generate the HTML, and spit it all back to you. So, obviously, this is less expensive than this. There's more CPU resources involved because it's got to do more work to basically generate the page. Typically, generating an HTML page takes 10 times longer than just serving it if it was a file, because the web server has to do more work. So because of that, traditionally, when you talk about web performance, people say, well, let's optimize this process. Let's do everything we can to make sure that this is fast, because we want to minimize the discrepancy between this and this. So they do things like application optimization. Who here has ever optimized code? I know you have, Strick. So that's the things like, okay, we're going to take this code and maybe it's nasty and has a lot of if statements and while loops, and let's try to optimize it so it can run faster. When we take this PHP program and we convert it into code the program runs, or the computer runs, let's keep a cached copy of that. So every time the page is requested, we don't have to recompile it. That's called caching bytecodes. Let's handle sessions appropriately. Then there's this idea of application object caching, which is saying, okay, we grabbed already from the database maybe the top 100 best-selling DVDs for this movie. And on every page, we're going to have on the side, here are the top items that are being sold today, the top 100 DVDs. So there's no sense on every single page, whether somebody's looking at the Scarface DVD or somebody's looking at the, 1 million BC DVD, there's no reason to ask the database over and over and over again for this list. We know it, let's cache it. You also have caching proxies that try to say, okay, once you've generated this HTML, let's store it, and the next person who asks it, there's no point for us to do all this calculation again. Let's do it once, and then here they take it and kind of store a cached copy. And then the next person that comes in, they just feed the cached copy to them. So they're trying to do things to reduce the amount of time. Now, what's interesting is that web performance has changed, and we'll see this, that dynamic content is fast. Typically, this is pretty amazing, and I can show you a diagram. When you visit Twitter, right, and basically, from the time I type twitter.com into my browser and click enter, it takes a third of a second, 300 milliseconds, for that request to go from my laptop. I don't even know where Twitter's servers are. Let's say San Jose. So it goes across the internet, or across the United States, hits Twitter servers, goes up through this stack, and they go, oh, Billy's requesting Strick's Twitter page. Okay, well, let's pull down the list of Strick's friends so we can populate the list. Let's pull down the most recent status updates from Strick. Let's put all this stuff, pull from the database, generate the page, and travel it back across the United States. Back across the United States. Takes a third of a second. That's pretty amazing. So basically what's happened is we've done such a good job with these basically back-end optimizations. Hooray, we won. And that's when you talk to people about web performance, they're like, that's boring. It's a solved problem. You either throw more hardware at the problem, or you use object caching, or use some of these programs like Memcached to help you. But the thing is that that's not the limiting factor anymore. It's all this other static content, which we'll see in just a second. Typically, on a website, if you go to CNN.com, the first page, basically the only part of CNN.com that's dynamic, is the HTML. Everything else, the images, the little thumbnails of all the stories, the CSS so it can render all the pretty colors, all of that crap, that's 95% of all the content has to download. CNN, actually, we can just look at this right now. So www.cnn.com, and there's an awesome Firefox plugin that's called View Dependencies. And if this thing ever comes up, it's going to go ahead and tell me, yeah, you can see down here it's doing a lot of transferring. It'll tell me all of the crap that it's got to download. We're going to right here, view page info, dependencies. All right, so here is the HTML. So the total size of CNN is 834K. Of that, the HTML page right here is 23K. All of the images it downloaded were 700K. Here are all it downloaded 17 JavaScript files. All of those are static. It downloaded 25 images. All of those are static. It downloaded some other images and stuff from other posts, some more scripts, some background images, and some Flash. So you're talking, only 5% of the page is this dynamic stuff. And so what we found is that to optimize websites and make them a lot faster, if you focus on somehow making this static stuff faster, you get huge performance returns. And that's basically what I'm going to be talking about. So to understand that, you need to see how a web page loads. So this is what's called a waterfall graph. This is actually pretty easy to understand. Basically, this is what your browser does when it's trying to render, say, CNN.com, or in this case, it's rendering the homepage of Zoom, which is the website that we have. So I'm visiting a page, zoomf.com/case studies. So the first thing my browser has to do is, first of all, it has to do a DNS lookup. It's got to go, okay, what's the IP address of that? That's what this bar is right here. It takes about 150 milliseconds. This is 200 milliseconds, 400 milliseconds. So it first does a DNS lookup. These orange, that's a TCP connection. It has to go ahead and do a three-way handshake, say, I want to start downloading data. This green part is my browser making the request. It says, hey, zoom.com, get me the file casestudies.php. Now, that's it making the request, and the green part is it's waiting. It's waiting until this is what's called the time to first byte. I've made the request, and now I'm waiting for the response. And the blue part is actually downloading. So we see that for me to get all of the HTML on the first page takes half a second. Now, everything here is all that other crap we were talking about. Style sheet, image, favorite icon. So all of this is all that other crap. So even if we doubled the speed that this back-end stuff worked at, we would go from 500 milliseconds to 250 milliseconds. But if we have the speed of this, you're talking seconds. So that's why we try to focus on what can we do to make this part faster. To give you an idea, this is what CNN's waterfall looks like. That little piece right there is it getting the HTML file. This is all that other crap. So now do you see why optimizing all of this other crap is where we should focus our attention on? Exactly. So there's really only two rules of web performance that we're going to focus on. You either need to reduce the size of what you're sending to the client, to the web browser. Don't send so much data. The fact that CNN is 800K to visit the main page of CNN, that's ridiculous. That's huge. That's a lot of data. So you want to reduce the size, the response size, or you want to reduce the number of trips. And we'll go into that second one in a minute. But the first one should be pretty obvious. If I'm not having to send you a lot of data, it's going to be faster. So I don't want to stand up here and lecture and show you slides and stuff because that's kind of boring. I'd rather do live performance autopsies. So what I'm going to do is we're going to look at live sites. We're going to look at live sites. I'm going to walk you through what they're doing that's wrong. So the first rule is, of course, you want to reduce response size. So has anyone ever wondered in the grocery store why orange juice from concentrate is so cheap and like Tropicana is so expensive? They're not shipping water. Exactly. It's a hell of a lot cheaper to ship powder than ship powder that's inside of water. So what happens is when you buy Publix brand orange juice that says made from concentrate, what happens is that they sent the local distributor maybe in Atlanta, they sent them a bunch of powder. And then for all the Atlanta Publix stores, they just add the water once you're inside the state of Georgia, and then they ship that, just a few, dozens of miles to the store, as opposed to sending fresh squeezed orange juice from Florida hundreds of miles. It's cheaper, it's smaller, and it's faster. It's the exact same idea what we're going to be doing. We're going to say, what are things that we can do to make this data that we have to send, how can we make it smaller? Now, obviously, if you guys ever think about pictures, you can have really high-resolution pictures, really, nice, pretty pictures that have lots of fidelity. They're like 5,000 pixels by 5,000 pixels. But what we want to make sure that we're doing is that we're not reducing quality. Obviously, the cheapest thing would be for CNN to do is turn off images. Just, go back to, 1992, and the image tag doesn't even exist. That's right. And you're freaking browsing by telnetting to port 80, which is actually an unbelievable amount of fun. I think my definition of fun is radically different than most people's. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to say, obviously, if you just got rid of crap, everything would be faster. But we're going to try to find a middle ground. We're going to say, what can you do to reduce the size without reducing quality? We're basically going to be looking for lossless optimizations. So I'm just going to browse around O'Reilly.com because they're kind of fun to pick on. O'Reilly.com. And I know whenever I see people having a web browser, I always try to figure out what plugins they have. So I'll just tell you, I have a plugin called AdBlock Pro, which is obviously awesome. I have a plugin called Firebug, which lets you debug the DOM and everything. I have another plugin called YSlow, which actually helps analyze the performance of a page. I have a plugin called DustMe Selectors, which basically says what CSS rules for this website are being used. I have the Web Developer Toolbar, which is freaking amazing, and we'll be using that quite a bit. I also have, this is really great, there's something down here called Color Picker. Basically, I come over here and I'm like, hey, what's the color of this red? And then you can come down here and it's like, would you like me to copy that as a hex number or an RGB or whatever you want to do. It makes it really handy when you're developing sites. So this is O'Reilly's page. Okay, not too much going on. It's kind of interesting. We want to find out how to make this page smaller. So the first thing you have to do is look at what's the source of the page. So can you all see that? I can bump up the size. Good? Excellent. All right, so... Oh, I went to the end. There we go. Okay. So this is the HTML. This is what makes up the page. So, this looks kind of interesting. We see links to style sheets. We see links to JavaScript files. If we come down here, we see they have a lot of HTML comments. This is interesting. These look like kind of maybe debugging comments. I don't know. Maybe it's a load balancer. I mean, they have a lot of stuff in here. They've got some JavaScript. So we want to try to figure out how we can make this smaller. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at some of these static files. And CSS, Cascading Style Sheets, is a static file. And we see, okay, yeah, here's some stuff, but it's got all sorts of stuff in it, right? Like, if we go all the way to the top, it's got, comments, like general body, general settings. Great, I don't care. This was we actually see that there's a comment for IE, which doesn't obey, blah, blah, blah. So they've got comments, they've got white space, they've got all sorts of crap in here. Now, this makes it really easy for me to read. But that's silly. What we want to do is minify. Like, CSS and JavaScript and HTML, they're human readable, right? They've got, white space in them and comments, and they're nice and pretty formatted. You see how it had the indenting? It was really easy to read. But, 99.99999% of users never look at them. You all, or that little, 1/1,000,000% that looks at them, because that's a really great way to figure out how to break into websites, is by looking at the core. So, if there's no need for these things to be human readable, why don't we just remove all the human stuff? Like, the browser doesn't care whether there's white space and comments. It just ignores it. And since humans aren't looking at it, why do we care? Let's just remove the white space and comments. So we go from something like this, where you have, nice and stuff like that, to you've removed all the white space. And you've removed all the comments. So how much data does that save, right? You're getting rid of bytes that don't need to be sent. Well, that reduces 18%. So all of the CSS on O'Reilly.com, if they just got rid of spaces and white space, it would be 18% smaller, which ended up being something like 15K. So their total page size, I think, was in the neighborhood of about 150 with all the resources. So just doing that would save them 10% of the total amount of data they're pushing down. One optimization, you just dropped your bandwidth by 10%. That's pretty awesome, right? Let's see what else we can do. Now, of course, it doesn't just apply to CSS, right? We also talked about JavaScript. So let's see what they're doing with their JavaScript. Oop. Let's go back up to the top. So I scroll down, and they've got this thing, O'Reilly.net engine.js. Let's look at it. Same thing. They've got comments, a lot of white spaces. It's nice and pretty to read. There's no reason for that to be there. Let's remove that white space. You'd also save space and time. But it's not only can you just do this to JavaScript and CSS, you actually can do it to HTML. So all this stuff that we're seeing, if we look here, let's go back. All these, there's a block of code where they used to be referencing this file, common.js, but they don't use it anymore. There's all of this stuff that they're actually accessing here. There's white space that makes it look pretty, and nice. If they remove, also, here's the funny thing. They have, inside of an HTML document, you can have inline style data. So instead of putting this style information in an external file, they just included it here. So the same way we took an external file of CSS data and minified it, let's minify the chunks of CSS that are inside the HTML document. So how much could that save you? Well, it would save them almost 12%. So basically the size of this page is just removing white space. And the funny thing is that remember, this is a programmatically generated page, right? Because it's the HTML, and this is the application tier. There's no reason you couldn't have in your PHP logic as it's building this page to remove all the spaces for you. I mean, you're pushing bytes down the pipe that you don't need to be pushing. So it's kind of silly. Now, of course, there's some other stuff you can do. I'm going to pull out a little tool here. This is just basically an HTTP editor. There are some other ones. You guys in the back, I can't change the font on this. I apologize. But basically, I'm going to visit O'Reilly.com, and I'm going to tell them that I can accept this page compressed. O'Reilly.com, accept encoding. So I'm basically telling them, hey, give me this page, and I support compression. And it's probably not going to work. So I get the response back. If nobody's ever looked at HTTP, this is what it looked like. But basically, there's nothing here that says content. Actually, it's transfer, or no, it's content encoding. gzip. Basically, there's this thing called HTTP compression. Has anybody here ever heard of HTTP compression? Awesome, good, okay. Sometimes I have difficulty telling where people are technically, and I'm teaching them really basic stuff that they already know, and it just pisses them off more. And so they don't say anything, which makes me think that I'm losing them, so I get more basic, which pisses them off more. It's a despair cycle. All right, so HTTP compression. This is God's gift to the internet. Because basically, instead of taking a page and pushing that entire page down, this is exactly like dehydrating food before you send it to space, right? We're going to take this page, crunch it, send the small thing, and then rehydrate it on the other side. Now, a lot of people say, wait a minute, the difference between this and this, other than this being smaller, is this big thing here. I have to, on my server, spend resources to compress it. And then my visitors have to spend resources uncompressing it. The thing is that computers operate, you measure operations in nanoseconds. Whereas when you're dealing with networks, you're measuring things in milliseconds in terms of delay. So the infinitesimal, almost not even detectable amount of energy it takes to compress this and send it, you get way more. I mean, this costs you, say, 2 microseconds, right? But doing this saved you 50 milliseconds. It doesn't matter. So at the end, it's actually a net. You should always do HTTP compression. And all modern web servers, they don't, if you request the same JavaScript file or whatever compressed, they don't keep recompressing it. They compress it once and save the cache copy. So the next time they get a request, they don't have to keep redoing it. So everybody should be doing, there's no reason not to do this. The frightening thing is that 70% of the Alexia Top 100, only 70% or only 30% of them are using gzip. 70% of the top sites on the internet are not doing this. If they turn this on, they would save, upwards of 70% immediately. The thing is that it's been formally part of HTTP for over 13 years. Informally, it's been around pretty much since Netscape Enterprise Server 2. Every web browser supports it. Your BlackBerry, your iPhone supports it. So there's no reason not to do this. It's just stupid. Now, so how much would O'Reilly save? They would save 76%. Their main page right now, so I miscalculated. Their main page right now, I checked all their all the resources, all the CSS, all the JavaScript it had to download. It was 254K. If they just made a one-line change to their Apache config, they would save 76%. So you're talking, this is like stupid basic stuff. Like, why wouldn't you do this? But you'd be amazed at how many people don't. So HTTP compression can save you upwards of 70%. Just instantaneous bonus. So there's another interesting thing here, and I can't necessarily show it, which is crunching images. Who here has ever heard of EXIF data? Awesome, great. So, it sticks all the information about your camera. Well, the thing is, there's a lot of other crap in an image that has nothing to do with the image. So you might have a picture of a rose, and this rose has 5,000 colors in the image. Now, there might be a palette, which is saying, like, hey, palette entry 1 is this color of red, blue, and green. And then in the image data, it says pixel at XY uses palette entry whatever. A lot of times, you will have more entries in the palette than are actually used by the image. So this is just extra crap. Those images, those colors that are defined are never used. So if you just remove them, you can reduce the size. Comments. Photoshop actually embeds a thumbnail of the image you're editing inside the image. Virgil gave a really funny talk a couple of years ago about this gal named Kat Schwartz, who took some rather racy photos of herself that were kind of cropped. Well, the uncropped version of the photo was inside the photo. So she basically posted naked pictures of herself to the internet without realizing it. Photo data, Photoshop, not only do they stick thumbnails in, but they'll stick information about color spaces and sometimes even undo data. So there's all sorts of crap in these images that has nothing to do with drawing the image. And you can remove it. And I have to stress, we're not changing the image quality. You still have the same number of colors. You still have the same dimensions. It's still the same quality. Nothing's blurred. You're just removing crap that's unneeded. O'Reilly would save 27%. All of their images, basically this is waste data. They're pushing this crap down the pipe, and they don't need to. So just by crunching your images. So how do you do that? There's a really great program, well, there are several, that are free. The best thing to do is go to a website called smush.it, so Smush It. Yahoo runs it. But basically, you can upload an image, and they'll give you the crunched version of the image. You can upload a zip file full of images, and they'll crunch all of them and give you a zip file back. So it's a web service that does all of this for you automatically, and it's free. So you can save quite a bit of or you can improve performance quite a bit by just crunching images. Yeah.
Is stripping information such as camera information, latitude, longitude, stuff, is that considered part of crunching, or is that?
Yes. No. It gets stripped too, because that stuff is stored in the EXIF header. So yeah, you can strip that stuff out too. Good question. And for a security reason and privacy, you should be stripping that. Yeah.
How much would this save in real life?
That's 27%. 27%. I'll show you the exit. So here, I'll So I've got a lovely tool that actually spits out, that basically automates a lot of this. And I was looking at O'Reilly earlier. Let me go here. Code, performance. Oh, nope, not there. No, actually, that is where it is. All right, here we go. Reports. O'Reilly. Okay. So, really simple. And I can kill that column and that column. Delete. Okay, so you want real-world examples. All right. Those are HTTP. Let's go sort A to Z. Yeah, expand selection. Okay, great. So, like this image right here. Let's go take a look at what that image is. It's a GIF. So that image right there, it is 14.38% bigger than it needs to be. It is a little over 6K. If you would simply convert it to a ping image, it would be 5.7K, and that's a savings of 14%. We actually can do, and actually here we see the gzip savings, which average out to be the 76% we talked about. Let's go over here because pings actually get really good when you crush them. All right, so ping crush. This image right here, this Facebook image, this is kind of silly because we'll talk about this one in a second. All right, this Facebook image, not very big, a little 16 by 16, like, add me to Facebook. It is, it's 1,300 bytes. If you ping crunched it, it would be reduced to 198 bytes. That's a savings of 85%. So yes, there's a lot of savings. So the aggregate for O'Reilly, if you take all of the images, be them JPEG or ping or whatever, the aggregate is total, they would save 27.7%. So they're basically pushing crap they don't have to push. Yes? Was that a question?
Is anybody able to talk about maybe like a server-side extension? Just remove all this data and cache data?
Good question. So there are a few open source projects that try to do this. The problem is that to run these, you typically want to do this in batch, right? Because it's not like it only takes 1/10 of a second to crunch an image. It actually, because, well, at least with pings, they try to manipulate different parts of the deflate compression algorithm, and so it can take anywhere from, depends obviously on your box and whether it's dual or quad core, but it can take anywhere from 1/2 second to 5 seconds. So you don't want to do this on demand because the last thing you want to do is take 3 seconds to save 200 bytes. So I actually have, I can point you guys to some resources. Some people have written some Perl scripts that you can just point at your web root, basically set up a cron job, and it'll go ahead and crunch the stuff automatically for you at midnight. And so if you upload new stuff, you don't have to worry about it.
Backups of the original data?
I mean, you could modify it to do that. So I didn't write it. So, but yeah, this is a good example. Actually, we'll talk about that later. But a lot of these optimizations, you bring up a good point. You want to incorporate them into a process. You don't want to just, I edited this image. Wait, did I crunch it? You want to build something that's automatic that does this for you. I actually suggest that. How many people here actually develop websites or write websites or do editing? Okay, great. So how many of you edit the HTML or the PHP, or if you're strict, it's Tickle because he's awesome and old school. How many of you edit the live server, like with Pico? Wow, that's very scary. I don't want to use your site. With frames, awesome. Is there a guy shoveling and it says under construction?
No.
Oh man. Thank God for Jason Scott for archiving GeoCities, so I could show my kids one point in the day. Like, yes, people used to think purple text on a black animated background was a good idea. Of course, to see that today, exactly. Facebook and MySpace is the new GeoCities. I love it. But you want to have a process, right? How many of you have like a development system and then you probably FTP the stuff, or hopefully secure FTP your web stuff to your production server? Please tell me you're doing that. Sort of? Okay.
I edit local files and
all right. I mean, I'm not trying to kick anybody in the nuts here, but it blows my mind how we've had 5 decades of how to develop software in terms of quality testing and code review and all sorts of stuff, and then we have web development, which does none of that. Where the guy's like, hold on, I'll fix that. I'm like, literally, I've seen somebody SSH into a web server from their phone and use Pico to change PHP on a banking application that's used by millions of people a day. And then he forgot a semicolon, and for 6 minutes, the site was just returning PHP errors and warnings. No, I can't tell you. I'm sorry. So you want to have a process, and Scott's going to I get off on these tangents, and that's why it takes 95 freaking minutes for me to talk.
Okay.
So I can leave now if you guys want me to, and we can go drink it.
That's
Okay.
why we put you last, so you can go as long as you want, Billy, all night.
I don't normally
We do have to be out by 8.
I don't normally get complaints about that, but I mean, if that's a problem
We do
for
have
some
to be
people.
out by 8:30 a.m.
Yes.
So if you're good.
Okay, good. All right, so you want to have a process, though, right? Like, ideally, you have a script. Call it your publishing script. That basically you run this program, and it should crunch your images for you. It should minify your CSS and JavaScript. Because the last thing you want, right, like, to go back, as a web developer...
Yeah, the web developer is going to go on there where it's like, where's all my formatting's going?
Well, yeah, like, I don't want to try to edit that. That's freaking insane. What you want to do is have your source code revisioning system, and you want to have that in your source code. And then what you do is when you push this to your production server, you run a program that copies this stuff, applies the optimizations for you, and hopefully uses secure copy to actually push this to your live site. That way you have something that is repeatable and consistent. Because that's actually, I can tell you some horror stories later. The worst part is when people, not so much on this stuff because it's lossless and easy and okay, you forgot to crunch some CSS, not so bad. But when you start getting into like caching and other stuff like that, if you have somebody who just randomly decides to start doing certain performance things and he doesn't tell anybody, it really causes problems.
Yeah, I've got another program coming in after my code and then changing it. Already I don't trust it.
So, but here's the thing, it's not changing your code. None of this is program code. Your CSS, okay, arguably your CSS is program code, but it's removing it's removing white space in comments though. And actually you can use JSMin to prove that it doesn't modify your code. Like it's not changing. Certainly the ones we have now, right? If you write your own, God help you. As somebody who's written tokenizers and parsers and abstract syntax tree creators, like that's a huge pain in the ass. Use something that somebody already developed. But, you should have no problem with someone crunching your images or somebody removing white space from your JS. All right. So that would save O'Reilly quite a bit. Now, there's also this is kind of funny. There's a lot of other crap in JS files that I'd like to show you. Actually, I wrote down a list of like funny sites that are doing really stupid things that I thought we could ridicule them together. Okay. So we talked about white space, right? And white space being crazy and commented out HTML. Let's take a look. This was just cracking me up. We'll stick it in. So let's take a look at. That sounded dirty.
Minify it.
Yes. All right. Let's look at Best Buy. Not bad. All right.
That's about a 55-second delay.
Well, it's the problem is it's going through that little netbook, which is running 6 VMs, and it's got an EVDO connection. All right. We only care about the source.
Where is the model?
We're still alive. We got some more stuff.
This is because the Geek Squad right.
Look where I am. I'm over here. I get to go to here. We're actually in the body now. So, it's crap loads of just junk. Unnecessary junk. So, lots of HTML crap. So, this is kind of funny. Let me go back. So, there's also some interesting things. Let me look at O'Reilly. Actually, I'll do it with this guy.
Is the bottleneck into bandwidth or like the CPU? Bandwidth is so cheap.
Good point. So remember, this is why necessarily the operational cost savings aren't so important, but it's the user experience. I had to download, instead of like downloading 64K to render the page, I downloaded 256K.
So it's for the user, not for the state to save money.
Exactly. It saves money too, but that brings up a really good point, and that was a flaw in my original logic, is that, oh man, I just saved you 70% of bandwidth. I don't give a damn. I have unlimited bandwidth from my hosting provider, right? Okay. He's busy? Is he busy? I don't think I want to know the answer to that question, actually. Yes. All right, so I'm going to let this sucker run in the background. So we kind of wrote some software to do a lot of this optimization stuff for us, so I'm just going to let that put some restrictions in it. So right here, and y'all aren't going to be able to see the back of that. So on O'Reilly, here are a bunch of issues that our tool found as having problems with it. And so some of the stuff I want to point out that made it too big, unnecessary tables. So a lot of times people will use table-based layouts. Instead of CSS, they'll use tables to lay out their page. That adds a tremendous amount of bulk to the page. Now, it's not just tables. Who wants to pick on no starch? I love no starch, but let's kick them in the nuts. So, where did no starch go? All right. Well, we can also look at the Outerz0ne page. We'll do that in a minute. All right, right here. So, no starch. So, here's something interesting that no starch is doing. We see, okay, it's got kind of like a nice laid out page. Everything's cool. Let's look at the source. What's going on under here? Tables. Tables everywhere. Lots of uncommented out. Apparently, they don't offer the Land of Lisp book anymore. Or, so they've got a bunch of commented out stuff that's not even being used. They're using table. This one boggles my mind. If we look down at the bottom of the page, I'm going to go, this is why I love Firebug, inspect element. I actually think this has this used to have oh yes it does. That's awesome. Increase. Oh, is it not going to increase the size of that? That would suck. No, it doesn't. That's really annoying. Okay, basically, let's scroll down. This whole thing is a table. Why? It's a bunch of books next to each other. Why is that a table? But it is. He's actually using a table, and then each book is another table cell. I mean, this is a table with a single row and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cells. So obviously this is a lot of just junk markup. If you converted this from a table to a CSS, you would probably save quite a lot. So it's more difficult to quantify those types of changes because you don't know, what you can take away, but you don't know what you have to add to give equivalent functionality. But that's a really good example of stuff that's bad. It's not, let me go back to the slides here. It's not just, dealing with stuff that you need to take away in the body. A lot of times people don't think about HTTP headers. I'll show you. I didn't tell them I was going to do this. They might be mad at me. So somebody I worked with here in town was a company called Pinnacle Promotions.
Those little icons you got there look kind of like spine stuff.
Those little orbs?
Those
Yeah,
little orbs.
they look very similar, don't they?
You might have, that's just a copyright issue.
I might have ganked an entire source tree before I left HP. No, of course not.
Multiple. For multiple agents.
While drinking, no less. All right, so I want to show you guys this. All right, so right away something wrong is happening in the state of Denmark, right? Or something's rotten. Because there's a lot of gibberish junk here. What the hell is all that? So if we look at this, we see it's in a set cookie header. Like, seriously? All of this is a cookie? So I'm like, well, that looks weird. So I go ahead and I come over here. Whoa. And so I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to stick it in, well, we'll do another notepad. And if I mess it up. Yeah, do you like that? It's hot. Normally the dimensions are a lot higher. So, all right, so the font should be big enough for you to see. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on word wrap, and if you look really hard, you start seeing patterns, like path, path, path. Basically, I don't want to go through and do that, but if you come back to this thing, they're basically setting the same cookie. You'll notice the value is exactly the same. In fact, I'll just kill this. They're setting the exact same cookie 8 times. Because you really want to make sure that thing sticks. So this is a programming bug, right? What happens is that Strict, you have a question?
Every time you refresh, is it one bigger?
No. That would be cool. No, it's the same 8. And because they're a client, I know why. Basically what happens is it's a shopping cart. They have an e-commerce site. And so they have a function in PHP that basically says, let me check to see if they already have a session. And if they don't, I'll set a cookie. And the problem is that the function that says, basically the if logged in or if has session, that is the function that says, do you have a session? And if the answer is no, I'm going to assign you a session. And the problem is that it just concats onto the set cookie. It doesn't check to see whether it already has. And in the course of their trying to determine to add an item to a shopping cart or their page generation, they call that function 8 times. So it appends a session, the same session, 8 times. Every single time. Basically, they're sending about 4K of cookie data on every single request. Everything. When actually the cookie is something only like it's only like 500 bytes. So you can save 3.5K off every single request just by programming mistake. So a really good example of kind of simple mistakes people make that you wouldn't really think, but let me tell you, 3.5K on every single request is a lot of data, and it slows things down. All right, white space crap. All right, that's pretty funny. So the other thing I found when I was browsing around, this was really weird. I was looking at, table-based layouts, and also not just that the entire site is laid out as a table, but also useless tables. If I look at CNN again, if I still have them up, I don't, so now I have to load it. CNN has some, oh, actually, no, it's on New York Times. That's kind of funny, because I'm about to show they have something else that's silly. So, on the New York Times webpage, where'd it go? Oh, I have AdBlock turned on, so you don't see it. There's a, hold on. Right-click, disable. Oh, I have to view crappy ads. Basically, yeah, exactly. Congratulations, you have nasty. Whenever I go home and like my mom is using Internet Explorer, even though I've installed Firefox 3 times and I changed the Firefox logo to be the Internet Explorer logo, somehow she still finds IE, right? Like I realize how dirty the internet is and how everybody wants to give you a mortgage apparently. So, where is it? There's something right here. This is a table. There's a table with a single row with a single element with this image inside of it. There's like random crap like that. So even if, unlike No Starch, where the entire page is laid out with a table, there's a lot of times where people are still using little inline tables for layout purposes, and there's no real reason to. So anyway, also on New York Times, in fact, we'll just do this live. We'll do it live! So that's Bill O'Reilly. Never mind. Okay, so anyway, they've got keywords, right? And I'm reading through this, and it's actually more visible over here. And I'm like, okay, that looks kind of interesting. Does that say pornography? I'm like, what? Seriously, there is a keyword on NewYorkTimes.com as pornography. There are other. What I love is the fact that pornography is between cellular telephones and Native Americans. So apparently,
What I want to see.
yeah. What's the motto of 4chan? If it exists on the internet, there's porn for it.
Rule 34.
Native Americans using cell phones and having sex, I guess.
Native American whores on cell phones.
Exactly. So, but that's the thing is apparently to learn about cell phones, pornography, and Native Americans, you need to go to the New York Times.
On one side, you have crimes and then Roman Catholic on the other.
Yeah, you've got sex crimes and opium, and I mean they live fast and loose at the New York Times. Those guys must like to party. So, okay, we've really belabored the reduce the amount of crap you got to send. And believe me, I've got bazillions of examples of crap that you shouldn't be sending. But the other thing is to reduce the number of trips. Now, this seems weird to people, right? They're like, what do you mean reduce the number of trips? Well, remember the green on those maps? The green is I've sent the request and I'm waiting for the response. The green is basically network latency plus the amount of time it took the server to process and serve the response. Now, basically, here we see nothing but green because it's downloading like a little, like the little 16 by 16 Facebook icon, right? That thing's what? A K? A K to download a K over a cable modem? That's you blink. It downloads faster than you blink. But the problem is that you had to wait 85, 95, 100 milliseconds for it to go to the server and come back just to deliver that teeny bit of data. And the problem is that this actually gets worse because pages, I have a graph, it's not in this one, basically the size of pages, the number of objects a web page has tripled in the last 3 years. So web pages are consisting of more and more external objects. So they're spending more and more of their time just waiting to get a teeny bit of data. And so what we want to try to do is reduce the number of requests. To go back to like the OJ analogy, right? Whenever you go to the grocery store you're making cookies, right? So you need flour and eggs and milk and chocolate chips and all that good stuff. So you don't go to the grocery store to buy one item and then drive home and then drive, well, I do this when I forget stuff. But, like the ideal is you make a list, you go, you get the 6 items you need, and you come back. Because round trips are expensive. Well, just like round trips are expensive to go into the grocery store, round trips are expensive for the web server. So one of the things here, well, we'll look at this in a second. So one of the things you want to do, where'd those guys go? These guys are hysterical. They're a Ruby on Rails developer group, but I can forgive them for that travesty. And they're called Steve and Alan. And they even describe themselves as Steve and Alan are your chubby founders of Less Everything. I mean, they just look like happy guys. I can't help but root for them. So, but, I mean, seriously, look how happy they are. So, anyway, if you look at the source of their page, and this is very, very common. Oh, crap. Home. Home. Ah. I can scroll. Scroll. Okay. All right, so, and let me go down one. What do we see? We see, wow, they're grabbing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different JavaScript files. Now look where the JavaScript files are. JavaScript's prototype, JavaScript's effects, JavaScript's drag and drop. All of these are served from the same directory. So instead of downloading, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 files, why don't I concatenate all of those files together and call them all my JavaScript.js? And I download once. So, okay, a lot of people say, well, that's literally, half a dozen or 6, right? You're just changing it. Well, what we're doing is we're reducing the number of requests. And there's actually a number of benefits that we get out of this. First of all, sending one 100K file is faster than sending 10 10K files. If you just think about it from the Pinnacle promotions and having those extra cookies on every single response, you've got the overhead of just doing HTTP. But instead of saying, I want this one file, let me wait that 100 milliseconds and then download a big piece of data, you have the, I want this file, wait 100 milliseconds, get a little bit of data. I want this file, wait 100 milliseconds, add a little bit of data. So it stacks, and it's actually worse. So the other cool thing is that if you had, say, 10 files that are each 10 kilobytes, if you concatenate them together and send it as a single response, it's not 100K. It's less than 100K because you're G-zipping them, right? It's compressing. If you're compressing, if I compress 10 separate files and I add them up, let's say I compress them from 10 to 9 because I have a small little bit of redundant data. So by compressing a 10K file, I can get it to 9K. But if you compress a 100K file, you actually can get it small. You get more of a compression because there's more data, there's more redundancy. Big files compress better than small files. So you get 2 bangs for your buck here. You get less data you have to push down the pipe, and you get less trips to do it in. This is when you can drastically improve the site. When you start doing stuff like this, you're knocking off, let's see, typically every external file you have to download adds 100 milliseconds. So if you think about CNN, and CNN has over 100 resources, CNN you would think would end up being like 10 seconds to 10 seconds to load. It's not because there's some things that can happen in parallel. But typically when you start saying, okay, we're going to take these 10 files and combine them to one, that's a second. You just saved a second off of page load time.
Plus all the extra coding on this page that actually requested.
Exactly. Plus all that overhead of HTTP, and plus the, basically everything. It's a no-brainer to do this. Anybody have a question? All right, sweet. So that's pretty, I've seen 8, I've seen 9. What's the worst I have ever seen? Rackspace has 17 external JavaScript files. Let's go look at them. Let's go see how silly they are.
Is that how things like WordPress do it? Do they do it like that when they load up?
No, WordPress is really bad because every plugin has its own JavaScript file and CSS file. So luckily there are some WordPress plugins that will run towards the end, and it will dynamically combine those into a single file for you. There's one called WP Minifier, which does the minification, and then there's another one, Auto-Optimizer. There's another one that does the concatenating files. Let's look at Rackspace. This just cracks me up. Okay, so that guy just annoys me. I don't know why he does.
I think go replace it for you.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Well, if we do Facebook, you can rickroll us all. So I'm using the Web Developer Toolbar. I said, show me all the JavaScript file, and I collapsed. Let's count the JavaScript files. One JavaScript file. So Scriptaculous. So they've got crazy shit, right? So let's go look at drag and drop. Oh, surprise, surprise, it's not minified. So they're downloading 17 files, and none of them are minified. Kind of silly. Can I go back? Oh, it doesn't. That's really kind of annoying. Oh, man, it doesn't. Okay. I have too many. There's something that annoys me. I wish anybody here actually contribute code to Firefox or work on Firefox or Mozilla in any way. The feature that I want to be able to like right-click and say close not all the windows, but I want to close all my view sources, because after a day I'll have like 15 things that say source of, source of, source of. And it's a huge pain in the ass. All right, so to look at this guy, I gotta cover that guy up. He's freaking me out. But then they have really odd things, right? Like, So, scripts/classes collection.js, set.js. Thank you for reproducing, basic CS theory data structures, because JavaScript doesn't have those natively. It does. I'm being sarcastic. Rackspace menus, key events. So all of these things, basically there's several files that can be combined. Now I know what you're thinking. Oh my god, some guy in IT is going to combine my... First he wanted to steal my white space, now he wants to combine my files? Yes, I do. Because, well, breaking up your files into set... Like, let's go look at set.
Well, you're not talking about doing that in source. You're talking about doing it in post.
Post, exactly. And look how big set is. Set is... I mean, you can see the boring thing. I got 3 pages, and most of this is comments, which will get stripped everywhere. So it's a really good development practice to break things into separate files, right? We've all seen the C program that has nothing but void main void, right? And it's fucking 15K, or well, actually more like 120. And you're like, oh my god, why did anybody do this? This is horrible. And they probably abuse the C preprocessor quite a bit too. But, so it's a good idea from a development point of view to break things into separate libraries. That makes sense, they're easy to manage, these are source code. From an end user performance point of view, it's the worst thing you can do ever. Like, you should kill kittens before you do that, because it totally ruins your end user's experience.
So Billy, since you've been picking on O'Reilly for like 6 or 8 months or something now, have they thought maybe they should call you? Have you gotten that phone call?
I actually reached out to them once because I've written some stuff for Make Magazine about mag stripes, and I reached out to like the editors and stuff I knew. I'm like, and the best thing is O'Reilly runs a conference called Velocity, which is about how to make websites fast. And their website is really, really slow. Not just O'Reilly.com, but the website about the conference about making websites fast is slow. It doesn't make sense.
You tell them it's a security feature too, because it's harder for hackers to read it.
Yeah, but
it's Johnny's waffle.
The reason those people are going is because they don't know.
But you think the people putting on the conference would know. That's the problem.
Yeah, well.
What's interesting, actually, so you just mentioned it's harder for hackers to read. I found this great website the other day called jsbeautifier.org. I had to write one of these from scratch, and it was a huge pain in the ass, and I never got permission from HP to release it. But basically, it takes obfuscated JavaScript and makes it pretty with indenting and white space and all that stuff. So basically, it's a way to go back from minification, which is really nice. Because normally, if you do that on your own, you have to write a tokenizer and then a parser, and then it's not fun. All right. Anytime you're dealing with a language that allows regex literals, totally screws you up when you're writing a tokenizer or a parser. All right, so CSS sprites. Who here has ever heard of a CSS sprite? Awesome. Excellent. Great. So a CSS sprite is... Who here remembers film strips? In school, right? Like, boop, click. I love that little noise. And if you were really good, you got to be the guy who was up there turning the film strip. Yeah, see?
You're always one behind? Or
Yes. Like, Billy, keep up. So, a CSS sprite is like a film strip. Or, I like to think of it like a Ouija board. Basically... No, it's true. Basically, this is actually the CSS sprite image that Google has. Here, we'll do it live, as I said, because we're doing the live autopsies. So let's look at this. www.google.com. All right. So we've got this logo. We've got everything else. And let's actually go to, cats. Whatever. I like cats. Okay, so view. Show me the image. See? So that image, if we go over here and say, show me what this sucker's doing, what it's doing is it has a single image, and then it's using, basically, here, it's a lot easier to see on this. What it's doing is it's got a single image, and then it says, all right, here's the image I want you to show, but I don't want you to show the entire image. I want you to go to negative 60 pixels in the Y direction and 0 pixels in the X direction and only show this part. And then for the colors or for you to move up and move down for your custom Google stuff, only show this people. It's just like a Ouija board. You've got all these letters, and you're moving the thing over and saying, just show me this, just show me this. So that's how, basically, that's the equivalent of combining CS or JavaScript files, but for images. Yeah?
How many years ago did web browsers start supporting this?
Anything that supports CSS supports this.
That's some specs for that?
Yeah, because what it's doing is it's saying both of these things. So this is actually used on Yahoo and AOL a lot. They'll have, anytime you see like a bunch of menu items with icons, or if you've got a web page that shows like different translations and they'll show different country flags, all of those, or you're dealing with, say, on any news site, and they're like, print this article, email this article, and they got the little, like the envelope icon and the printer icon and the, save this to Facebook icon, whatever. Those are always really good candidates for this. So on Yahoo, what they have is this car for autos, like, here's the actual image they're using. And then they basically say, okay, for the span for the game, we want you to use this sprite, but go to background position, 4 pixels over, and a negative 212. So only show this little game controller. Now for the stock picker, we want you to go to the same image. I've got this backwards, but go up here, negative, so you're only showing this.
If you run into a website that's optimized or not optimized to where it uses a sprite library, but it only uses one sprite in it on that particular page.
Well, that would just be that would just be a regular background image, right?
Yeah, well, I'm saying just grabbing the whole image as opposed to all it needed was a little itty bitty PNG.
So that's a good point. So you don't want to combine all of your images necessarily into a single sprite. What you probably want to do is break it into 5 or 6 sprites because, like, for example, Yahoo, it worked out really well because all of these images are displayed on their front page. But if only this image was displayed on the front page and these were used once you're logged into, like, Yahoo Mail, it makes no sense for you to download them now. You're making everybody download when probably only 10% of the people who visit your main page also visit and use those. So you have to be smart, and actually our software kind of helps you figure out, based on traffic patterns, what should be grouped together. But this is what CSS sprites are. Now, really close to CSS sprites are image maps. Let's go kick no starch in the nuts again. So I like no starch a lot, so I'm not trying to be mean. But so this, we've got a whole bunch of images right next to one another. And we've got, and if you right-click, do view image, it's a separate image. Is that the Magna Guide to Calculus? Oh my God, people will put Japanese schoolgirls on anything. All right, so, the Google Way, whatever. So all of these are images. Why isn't this just one big image? Right? Like, why am I downloading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 images? These images are always in the footer. They're always together. This isn't a dynamically generated page. Like, you can refresh this page as much as you want. These images don't change. So what really should be is there should be one image that should be transparent. That way you get this yellow shining through. And you would have a single image for all of these guys. And then has anybody here ever used a client-side image map or written a client-side image map? Yeah. It looks like this. So basically, the pattern you're kind of looking for in HTML is a series of hyperlinks that have images inside of them that are next to each other. It's like, look, instead of having an image that's a link and an image that's a link, you see this a lot also on blogs where it's like, follow us on Twitter. Actually, I'll show you a really good example. On the Zoom page, we're doing it. So, zoom.com. So this thing right up here, follow us on Twitter. If I go right-click, inspect element, there should actually, oh, here we go, image. So it's showing that this image right here is actually the 3 of them. And then here I'll view it in the code, that way you can see it better.
That was Firebug?
Yeah. So right here, map. So basically, my image is here. And if I go to this image, we see that the 3, it's not 3 separate images, it's a single image. And then in my source, what? You can't really, because I want to preserve the formatting. Not in that case, because I did. That's kind of funny, actually. In that case, I did need to preserve formatting, because it was important to the end user. So a map basically says, look, hey, this image, it's going to be using this map. And this map basically says, look, if they're in a rectangle defined by 0, 0 to 30, 30, if they click there, send them to this hyperlink. If they click inside this rectangle, send them to this hyperlink. And so that's how it's 3 images. It's 1 image, but when you click on top of the Twitter one, it sends you to Twitter. When you click across the RSS feed, it goes to the RSS feed. So, hey, Lady Merlin, I've got like only about 5 minutes left, 10 minutes, something like that. At least 15, thank you. I appreciate that. See, look how dirty this is getting. I've got page information. Like, I've only got 1 Firefox window open, but I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What?
Autopsies is the easy Windows micro.
Right, but I don't want to close. I don't want to actually close. What I want to do is close everything that's not the main browsing window. I want to close all that other crap.
Just by source title. This one.
Really?
Close all titles that say source up in the name, and it'll close all of them.
That's not part of. No, that's like an add-on, right? That's not part
Yeah,
of.
it's like a.
Okay.
What's the one that iGeek uses?
I use Autopsies for a lot of stuff.
Autopsies, and
Okay.
close.
All right, so those are adjacent images that you can replace with image maps. So again, really great way that you can actually reduce the number of requests that need to be made. I just thought I'd point out other really stupid stuff. So let's look at Sears.com, because this is kind of silly. Well, so this is the oh, I can show you the entire waterfall for it.
Yeah, Black Friday
Sears.
was a Google location.
All right, so we're going to go click, 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 click. I love the fact that Firefox zooms images as well as text. So, wow, that's really zoomed in. So, we see right here that you visit Sears.com, and it gives you a 301, which is a redirect. And it basically says, hey, I'm not going to give you data. Go to www.sears.com. So you go there, and it says, do a redirect to SSO. Now, somebody who has dealt with networks a lot, SSO almost entirely always means single sign-on portal, which is like here, authenticate with an RSID or something like that. Basically, if we actually use our HTTP editor to see this, let's do http://.
What editor is that?
So this is one that we wrote. I recommend Burp Suite is a really good way of editing. So this is like kind of an inline performance tool that lets you type in, say, let me see this response, and then it also rates it for the issues. I'll talk about this later, but we have some free tools that you all can download and play with that finds about 300 performance problems in your websites, which is pretty cool. But so what they're doing in a nutshell, www.sears.com. So if you go here, I'm probably going to have that duplicate. Oh, so it flagged the fact that they're having duplicate cookies. So the same way that Pinnacle promotion site had, the 10 or 8 duplicate cookies. Actually, if we look at the headers, they set the JSON. Oh, yeah, see, they're doing it too. Where'd it go? Cookies, there's one. WP persistent. Huh. I don't know, maybe that's a bug. Anyway, so they're saying, no, go. Oh, first of all, it's an IBM HTTP server, which is Apache. So they're like, go to this single sign-on service, and this has all sorts of fun variables, like site source ID, gateway equals true, service key. If I were still hacking websites, I would love to play around with this. So anyway, that, if we go back to the load graph, that is like the single sign-on service, which then basically, if you don't enter anything in, it sends you to this other CAS login, and then ultimately sends you to Sears.com home, and then it's not until the 7th request. If we look down here, this is a website called webpagetest.org that generates the waterfalls, and we see that it's not until here, where'd it go? Response headers, right there, HTML. So it's not until the 8th request that we're actually getting the web page. So basically, Sears just screws with you, like a tease, as Press Mike was talking about earlier. Basically teases you for 8 requests, being like, oh, we're going to give you something. Oh, we're going to give you something. It's going to be great. Stick around. Ooh, some single sign-on stuff. Ooh, we're giving you some more stuff.
Maybe my friend would like you.
Maybe my friend would like you, indeed. Let me pass you along. We see right here, it's not until, and this is seconds, it's not until 2 seconds into the process before you get the web page. So Sears.com on every single, actually it uses cookies, so it only does this to you once, but basically every single visitor is delayed by 2 seconds just to do some crazy single sign-on crap, which is probably used for an internal system, so they can, log in and debug it or something. I don't know why it does this, but it does this for everything. So that's 2 seconds they're adding on to every single page, totally unnecessary. From a performance point of view, that's retarded. Web page test. Ziploc, I think I've Twittered it before. Okay. Yeah, it's webpagetest.org. Okay, so yeah, add 2 seconds to every response, which is just stupid. Gateway. This is awesome. Okay, so let's look at this because this is just funny. All right, so we're going to go to gateway.com. I used to love getting those cow boxes in the mail. I miss that. All right, so this is Gateway. That's kind of pretty. They have some March Madness stuff going on. Again, view source is your friend. So I'm looking around. Everything's cool. And I decide, and of course I like to look at style sheets to see if they're minified, and they didn't minify them. And then I'm looking along, and I see something that looks a little weird. And it's right here. HTTPS. That's SSL. I visited the main page of gateway.com. It sent me to a CSS file, which is going to tell me how to draw the page. And then the CSS file is downloading a lot of images, but it's using SSL. Everybody here knows what SSL is, right? No. Is that like a, why dare did you ask me that question? Or was that a no, I don't, but I don't want to volunteer? I can never dereference that whole former or latter. I'm always like, shit, which one do they mean? Like, is it, never mind. So, is that a, I'm going to explain what SSL is anyway, and you can't get me out this podium, so. No. Okay, then I won't. Anyway, so they're using SSL. Whenever you see SSL on a normal website, if you're not logged in, they're being stupid. Because the whole point of SSL, right, is confidentiality. Like, you can't see what's being sniffed. But the thing is, if I'm not authenticated to you, you have no idea who I am. So you have no business sending me anything that has to be confidential because you don't have anything that you could send to me because you don't know who the hell I am. So the fact that they're using SSL is stupid. How stupid, you ask? Well, let's look at the load graph. Because SSL is extremely costly to the server. It has to do an initial asymmetric key transfer, and then it has to use asymmetric key encryption to decide on a symmetric key encryption, and then it has to keep that symmetric session alive and do SSL renegotiation. So let's look at what that means. Is that... No, that's Rackspace. Gateway, here we go. All right, I'm going to close it down. All right, so pink is SSL negotiation. So we're just on a regular HTTP page, gateway, we grab the styles page, and then it starts fetching things that style references. And so we see, bang, purple, because it's having to use SSL negotiation. And if we jump to that, this one file, SSL negotiation took 1/3 of a second. So fetching this image, which is just this border, for those of you who can see it on the side, that border contains extremely confidential information. We have to protect that with, 124-bit, RSA keys. And here's the funny thing, right? I'm just going to come up here, and I'm going to take that S off. I still get the image. There's no reason to use SSL. So how much is this hurting them? Yeah, probably. So how... Oh, wait a minute. Well, yeah, I was over here. Back. So that cost them 1/3 of a second. The purple is where they needed to continue doing renegotiations. So all of this purple, and these little ones add, 90 seconds, 90 milliseconds. Not a huge amount, but there's a whole lot of them. So basically, if you add all of these up, 25% of the page load time. If you aggregate that, it's 1.5 seconds due to the overhead of SSL. The page loads in a little over 5 seconds. So over 25% of the total time it takes to load the page is just all this SSL crap, which they don't need to be doing anyway. So I'll tell you why I think they did it. Well, first of all, these guys just made a mistake. They put a couple of S's when there didn't need to be S's, and they just blew themselves in the foot. Wait, That sounded really dirty. They shot themselves in the foot with a gun. They blew a hole. And they just added 1.5 seconds for no reason whatsoever to the amount of time for the load. I kind of wanted to think whether the developer was like, hey, Johnny, I totally can make our site slower. I'd be like, no, you can't. I'm like, seriously, I'm going to make it slow, and I'm only going to use the S character. I had to think that this was a dare. Like, I could slow it down using a single byte.
Somebody got pissed off with the sales department.
But here's why I think that, so to answer your question, why in God's name would anyone do this? Who here has heard of a mixed content warning? So if you're ever browsing around, IE's really bad about this. Firefox freaks out a lot too. If you're on a site using SSL and it's fetching an image or something like that, not using SSL, it pops up a warning and basically says, whoa, 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 you're on an encrypted page, but you're going to go get some crap that's not over an encrypted connection. We might leak some cookies. There could be bad stuff. So what I think happened is that this style sheet, let me go back over here. I think this style sheet right here is referenced by both the unlogged in part of gateway.com and then the part of where you're checking out. And so because they didn't want a warning, they put HTTP so that when you are not logged in, you just screw everybody and make them wait 1.5 seconds. And when you are logged in, you don't get an annoying error message. The problem is that there's a much better solution. Who here has ever heard of protocol relative URLs? Wow, hardly anybody. This is awesome. Okay, so get rid of that. Font. That's a distinct possibility. So let's say, like gateway.com / we'll just make this easy, style CSS. And on this page, actually, let's just make it even easier. We'll just do, index.html. And then in this page, it's an HTML document. And somewhere in it, they've got, say, like image source equals https : foo dot, or, whatever. Gateway.com / logo.png. And so that way, whether you're visiting this gateway over SSL or not, you'll always have the SSL logo. But the thing is that if you take this and put that's called a protocol relative URL. It basically says, they fetched this HTML file using HTTP. So I will fetch this resource because the protocol isn't defined. I'll fetch it using the resource or the protocol that was used to get the containing document. It's actually the parent. So if they got so in this example, there was an HTML page that linked to a CSS page that had the images using SSL. If inside, since the CSS page was referenced using HTTP, if the links to the images in the CSS document used protocol relative, it would go up to what the CSS file had been fetched with. So the other cool thing is not only does this get rid of the SSL problem, the 1.5 seconds of bullshit you don't need to deal with, it also makes the document smaller, because I just eliminated 5 bytes from every single image that's there. Yeah. But the thing is I've got to think that Gateway.com has done a site redesign since Netscape 4 came out, right? Where, because they're doing these reevaluations. I was dealing with some guys the other day who are like, we don't even support IE6 anymore. Which, good, thank God, that's a horrible zombie. But, you know what I'm saying? I understand your argument, but that's a silly argument. We should punch them in the face. We can do it together. You can hold them down. I'll whack them. All right. So, needless to say, I'll tell you what. They're not going to kick me off here. Somebody give me a site. Let's look at crap that's wrong with them.
Outerz0ne.org.
Let's look at Outerz. What? Time Q. Is that like Tub Girl?
No.
If it was, would you tell me?
One man, one job.
Okay. All right, we're gonna look at Outerz0ne for a moment. So, a couple of things they're doing wrong. All right, first of all, there's an inline CSS, or there's an inline style tag that's not minified. Apparently, Trevor likes to use Dreamweaver to make his sites. It's a table-based layout. He is referencing images that are on Outerzone, so there's no reason for him to have http://www.outerzone.org all over the place. He should just put /images/spacer GIF and shoot him in the head for using blank images to do layout. Yes.
So the technical way to optimize the person is supposed to be updating the website.
Not necessarily. You want to have lots of people. So some of these issues that we talked about are things web develop or the IT guys can solve. So crunching images, minification, crunching images, HTTP compression. We didn't talk about caching. There's lots of stuff that are simply server configuration issues. But then there are things like combining images that you're probably going to need to work with the web developer on. Now, for small sites like you, I'm sure you're both the web developer and the IT guy because you're running your own site. It really just depends on the maturity of your organization. Like, are you freaking using Pico from a cell phone to modify PHP in a production banking app, or do you have more of a process in place? So how you do these optimizations is going to vary in your organization, but everybody can right now go crunch your images, turn on compression, minify. There's no reason you can't do any of that stuff right now. And you don't need to tell the web developer you're doing it, unless they don't have source control and they're actually, like, the production site is their backup.
So the problem is that you're assuming developers know what they're doing. What they do is they use something like Dreamweaver or some framework, Symphony, that generates all this code for them. And they never use the source.
So,
What the hell is that?
I'm using you as an example of poor web performance.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm sure Skydock didn't write this by hand. Dreamweaver generator.
And don't have too much arguments about that because it took him all the way up to 4 days ago to do it in the first place. Now it's going to take him all the way up until next week after it.
So to answer your question about some of this is done by the frameworks and the web.
Most of it.
See, of the issues, so our company finds about over 300 performance issues now, and I would say 30 to 40% actually can be fixed by IT that have nothing to do with necessarily the underlying structure. So, but seriously, I can show you the list, and I can walk through, and I can show you which ones actually can be fixed by IT.
Not tonight.
Oh, I won't. No, we're finishing up.
And they're worth the time and effort.
Good point. So that's the other really good thing about this is that the tools we've done, which are free, you can go to zoomf.com right now and get scans, and it'll tell you how much you save. It goes through and it says, yeah, if you crunch your image, you're going to save 17% off your bandwidth bill. If you turn on HTTP compression for these resources, you will consume this much less. And actually, our professional services, we consume your web server logs, so we know exactly how much data you're sending and what you're sending. So we can specifically say, if you do X, you will save Y. 100%. So I'm actually not going to continue to find problems with sites now that Trevor's right there. But so basically here, I'll finish up. So this is kind of cool. If you want to optimize your site, what can you do? Well, we actually have a free web performance assessment. You can go to zoomf.com right now. You punch it in. It's entirely automated. So you can plug your information in, basically the site you want scanned, your email address, and it will analyze, not your entire site, that's our professional stuff, but it'll do a pretty good analysis, do all 300, actually we're on 320 some odd checks now, and automatically generate a report and email it to you. That's it right there. You just plug your information in, everything works out. The other thing is I hate it when people get up and say, even if they're offering something free and then they have something paid, they don't tell you other alternatives. There's a great tool from Yahoo called YSlow. It's a plugin to Firebug, which is a plugin to Firefox to find some of these issues. They only find about 24. Google has one called PageSpeed. There's that great website we talked about earlier, webpagetest.org, that generates the waterfall document to tell you everything. We write a lot of really cool stuff on our blog. Actually, Google released a new version of their tool in February and actually referenced some articles we had written on our blog where we had found kind of some new performance issues that dealt with CSS issues we had found, and they actually added checks to their product and credited us saying, we didn't know about these guys found them, so we're now adding that to our free tool. So we're doing a pretty good job of finding new performance problems that people don't know about. And you can follow us on the blog, or just send me an email, Billy@Zoom. Yeah, straight.
Based on personal experience, be sure you spell Zoom that way.
What did you find? It was bad. Something you can't unsee. What's up, Strick?
So what do you think of the tool that does transform your JavaScript into different JavaScript, which is not only a lot smaller, but has runtime optimization?
You're talking about Clojure? Google's Clojure?
Yeah.
So I like Clojure. The difficulty with Clojure is when your site fails in production and you get basically an error log, and they're like, yeah, the thing that appears in the JavaScript console is variable ABC puked in function _F_234.
That doesn't scare people who use C++.
Well, but what I'm saying is that as part of the conversion process, what's running on your site is different than what's in your environment, and so it can be very difficult to get bug reports that it's running on different code. Even if it's functionally equivalent, it's syntactically different, and try to trace it back.
But it makes it so much
It does.
smaller.
Clojure is really impressive.
If it just changed it a little bit, I would agree with you.
Yeah, no, I'm down for. I mean, we recommend that people use Clojure, and for people who are concerned about that, we tell them, look, this is a problem, and if they're concerned, we recommend a tool like JSMin or the Yule compressor, which does a really good job of just removing white space and your variable names and your functions, and syntactically your code is exactly the same. If they have that problem, yeah.
If you put in your username and password, will it upload your MySpace page?
Yeah, we use the little Bobby Tables method for that, with a tick drop with your username. Does anybody have any other questions?
What's that part in the middle again?
Performance. All right, cool. Thanks, Adrian. Yeah.
So they do have shared hosting, and they haven't turned on gzip conversion.
Good point. So we actually have a series of blog posts that are questions to ask your hosting provider. Mod gzip is actually enabled by default in every single default Apache config. So it's already compiled in, and a lot of times, if you have htaccess, you could create an htaccess file. You probably don't have access to httpd.com, but you can create an .htaccess file and actually turn it on. There are some hosting providers, though, that actually have compiled their own Apache, which is normally bad because they're behind on security updates. So you shouldn't use them for that reason. And also, sometimes you'll get a little pushback because they'll be like, but we give you unlimited bandwidth. Why do you care about compression? But I find you normally can. And if they tell you no, go find somewhere else.
I did a speed test and I was like 15 seconds.
Yeah, no. You want to go. I can help you fix it. You should go to Zoom and get a report, and it'll tell you how to fix it. But basically your standard things you should get with Apache on any hosting environment, even virtual, should be mod deflate, which is default, and mod expires, which allows you to do HTTP caching. All right. How far over did I go? 45 minutes. I am awesome.